looking up at this ridiculously sized reptilian. I thought for sure we were going to get our rectals ripped. But this thing just kind of stared at us for a while. It seemed to be clinging on as though it was trying to simply stay put, keep itself vertical. It was strange, confusing, but only for a moment. Suddenly, there was a massive yell slash squeal that was emanating throughout the entire area. It echoed off every single bulkhead, every single door. Even the floor seemed to radiate this. It seemed to be almost just a simple screech into the air until we looked and we found out where it was coming from. One of these, well, this wasn't a little piggy anymore. No, this thing was much, much larger than the ones we had taken down. This warthog-looking son of a bitch was screeching at it and motioning for it to go forward. This reptilian seemed to move its head slightly, as though it wanted to see the exact movements of piggy number 3 in the brick house here, and then turn towards us. We realized this thing was under its command. I didn't see a collar, I didn't see anything that would make it do this, but for some reason, it was ready to go, and it began to move its way forward. It didn't move forward like you would think a quadruped would move, or even a biped, but no, instead, it seemed to move by latching on to everything with its tentacle pieces, and then moving forward as it swung forward with its giant claws. We didn't hesitate. We began to pump round after round into it, and I actually got scared as I felt the slide lock to the rear. As I replaced the magazine, I could see that this thing was taking hits after hits into the chest, and thankfully they were getting through. The echoing of the sound was enough that those that had woke us up were covering their ears, or holding whatever I can understand might be their ears, as they simply held back in that strange control room. We worried what in the ever-loving shit was going on, and I worried if we wouldn't have enough lead at our disposal to take this thing down, but eventually it seemed to have trouble breathing, and it started to falter. Behind it, as it dropped down even more, the giant pig-faced freak ran towards it and began to kick it and swing at it with some sort of strange baton. It suddenly hit me like a bag of turds to the face. That thing was believed that baton was what was going to be the danger. We do the same thing with elephants. At least we did. I didn't, but I've known it. It's a way of breaking the will of an animal that it will eventually become stronger and larger than you. They fear that baton more than anything else, and I realized what was going on. Not being able to get a clean shot from where I was, I screamed, "Shoot the baton! Shoot the baton!" And with that, at least 3 guys that did have rifles aimed for that thing's arm and began to fire. It shot right through its hand and right through its wrist down into its forearm. It dropped the baton and squealed again to the stars, and it backed up even more, and the reptilian seemed to turn back and look. It looked down at the baton, and then at the pig. The pig didn't seem to even notice that it had dropped anything. It was just more concerned with the fact that it just took a couple 5.56 bullets that went through and probably tore its tendons apart. It wouldn't be able to use that hand anytime soon. But given the size of this thing, it was like taking a BB gun really hard to the hand, but one with a little bit more piercing ability. That was going to be its fatal mistake, not realizing that it dropped the baton. When it did, the reptilian seemed to gain a second wind as it got up and started swinging several of its tentacles and its other arm at this pig. And it would have made quick work of the porker too, if it wasn't for the fact that we had just pumped it full of Lord knows how much lead. It faltered as it swung over and hit the pig, knocking it into the wall. One of its tentacles came down like a whip and slashed it, but it didn't do enough damage. Though it did cut the pig open, the pig was still on its feet. Well, for a second, and then down to one knee as it winced from the pain. But as it did so, you realized that the big lizard didn't have a chance anymore. We had all quit firing as we were enjoying the show at this point, trying to figure out what in the ever-loving crap was going on. But the lizard itself began to lose its grip, and it tumbled down past the catwalk we were on, down the probably 80 or 90 feet to the bottom, and we heard it crash, and with that we heard its bones crunch as it hit. It was clear to see when it landed. It was already done. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. A bunch of us ran across towards the pig guy, and just as we started to raise our weapons, I heard one say, "No, no, no, I got this." I looked back, and the man was holding 2 blades. Both of them were definitely designed for some nasty shit. I looked as he held the K-bar in each hand. He whipped one around and held it backwards, and then he got into position. He got into that fighting stance. I know it well. I was trained on it myself. And I watched as the pig looked at him as the rest of us lowered our weapons and backed away, thinking, okay, one-on-one, I'll at least take down one of these angry hairless monkeys with me. But as it tried to swing down, it wasn't a chance to hit it. This man moved left, right, up and down so fast I was having trouble tracking his movements. He would come in close, slash at the abdomen, causing some of the guts to start spilling out. Using its bad hand, it tried to keep the guts in and swung again at the man with the knives. He flipped around again, this time shoving one of the knives into the back of the leg. This thing squealed as loud as it could and then swung again at them. His massive size made it so he wasn't moving nearly as fast as the man with the knives, and eventually the man stabbed him in the back, in the shoulders, in both legs. It was down on its knees, and we realized this thing, whatever the hell it was, wanted us dead. And before it finally fell, the man looked up, held the knife high as he flipped it down to stab down, and said, "Squeal like a pig, boy." And he jabbed both of the K-bars down into its shoulders on the side of its neck. We could see the blood squirting out as this thing's carotid artery, at least one of them, if it did have 2 like us, sprayed across. It was a massive squirt, at least a good 12 feet, that shot out to the side. It squealed one last time as the man yanked up hard and ripped both blades out, and with that the pig dropped. The man stood there for a second. We were in awe at this. He turned around and said, "So, who likes ham? The bacon's mine, though." Thankfully, most of us chuckled at this. A few others didn't like the dark humor, but it was what it was. And with that, we went back to those creatures that had got us out of the pods. We tried to figure out what was going on, and yet we still didn't have a chance to breathe. Just as we started to ask them what was going on, another shudder happened, and it launched us sideways. Now what? Seriously, did I actually die in that pod? Am I in hell? What the hell is going on here? I reached up and made sure that my other magazines were empty. Great. I only got about 4 or 5 rounds left. That's not a lot. A few others checked their ammo, and a lot of people had already run dry. Great, just what you need. Black on ammo with no chance of resupply. This is wonderful! We went into the control room and again started asking questions. What is going on? The mechanical voice tried to spill out as best we could, and we had to stop others from asking questions because it would just step on what we were hearing. We simply let them explain. As it turns out, our so-called leaders weren't the actual problem. They weren't the reason why we were out here. Approximately 25 to 30 years by human standards, after we had gone into stasis, the Earth was attacked. Those that had been on the planet, that had been monitoring them, just simply abandoned us to our own devices. Those that we thought were allies simply took off. Great. And then several different factions began to fight over the planet itself, mainly over the people. As it turns out, humanity, though not very complex, was very strong, very fast, relatively smart, and able to deal with a whole bunch of crap around the galaxy. And because of that, they made excellent slaves. Along with that, they also found out that Terran tastes pretty damn good. Well, we're about to answer that bite for bite because my stomach was rumbling as I listened. As we sat there, the one who had carved the pig up for dinner, quite literally carved the pig up for dinner while we listened. He was listening intently and only had some strange questions as we went, but we listened close. As it turned out, the Earth itself had been so fought over, along with the rest of our own solar system, that many of the planets had already been broken apart. Jupiter and all the rest of the gas giants were already sucked clean, and their resources used in different engine components. Many of the other planets, like Mars, had been mined down to barely an asteroid. This scared the crap out of us. The team that had got us were part of a group that was trying to salvage what was left of humanity. Our cryopods were based so far deep in the earth that most people missed it. And the fact that they wanted to take the Earth's resources intact means they had to do it in a particular order, which means the mountain that we were in was one of the last things that was ripped apart. We thought about it for a second, and we did have to ask one question. If we were in a mountain, are we still in the mountain? What is going on? It was strange. We couldn't quite wrap our heads around the idea that the mountain itself had been removed. They had no way of safely removing the pods and taking us, so they simply had sent down a ship and taken the whole damn mountain. This, what we looked at, was the last remnants of our home planet. A simple shard of what was. Though many of the genomes of the plant and animal and even insect species had been categorized. So yes, they could be cloned. The original species, the original samples, everything original was pretty much gone. As far as humanity, we were it. Though you would still find a few that were out on the outskirts, usually held as guard dogs for those who are super wealthy. You wouldn't find many. Wonderful. 7 billion down to a couple hundred. Great, that's just wonderful. I swear, I died in that pod. I'm in hell. But it is what it is. And with that, they were able to hook up a translator, finally able to master our speech. Since everyone who was in that mountain at least spoke English, they set it to that. And with that, we started to get our answers more clearly. As it turns out, several species had turned into basically pirate races, slave races, and they had begun to take over the rest of the galaxy. One of the reasons why we were taken wasn't just to preserve humanity, but the fact that humans were found to be so dangerous that they were also used as some of the greatest weapons. In one case, there was a human who had been already missing a leg, yet was unbelievably powerful in battle, had taken down several different battalions by himself. We wondered how this was even possible, considering the size of some of these guys, and we were informed that our biomass was arranged unique. What do you mean unique, was the question we had. As it turns out, our high-gravity planet and the fact that we were being bombarded with so much radiation, along with diseases and a whole bunch of other crap, turned our bodies into basically walking tanks. We began to fully understand the situation now. We all looked at each other, and with very little conversation, we knew what we had to do. If we were going to survive if we were going to expand as a species and thrive, we didn't have much of a choice in the matter. Considering all we had was a small chunk of granite with a couple of pods that actually survived being moved, we found out that a few of them, if the pod was ruptured in some way, the power supply was cut off, or anything, the pods didn't work. Yet there were still some inside. That is, if those pirates that apparently had attacked us hadn't gone in and taken them away. We hurried up, and a few of us rushed inside to see if the pods were still there, still intact, and to our great surprise, many of them were still intact and still had folks in them. We left a security detail, and the rest of us went to clear the ship. Many of us didn't have much ammo left. Those with rifles stayed behind, and obviously most of the women did as well, because they would be needed to help waken people up. It was a whole lot easier with a female voice. It's a human thing. We had to tell them all. It's just a human thing. We must have sounded absolutely ridiculous every time we had to say, it's a human thing. But I can think of another time when there was another phrase similar to that, which sounded just as ridiculous. Although those guys were ridiculous. So I wonder how we look to them. All in all, it was an easy clear of the ship. There was no more of those giant monsters out there, just a couple of those Piggly Wigglies around, with the occasional mantis. And, well, they were very easy to dispatch. The only problem we had was the fact that most of us were starving and incredibly thirsty. We didn't know where the provisions were, what was safe to eat or drink, so we had to keep going. With one of those demons with us, the one I had actually damaged his ankle, thankfully he was walking fine by now, still with us, telling us where to go, we ended up towards the bridge. Unfortunately for the bridge crew, they weren't still alive. Many of them had been taken down by some sort of energy weapon. We didn't know what it was, but it's pretty clear by the burn marks. We looked in close, and we're looking at about third-degree burns, focused down to something a little bit bigger than a silver dollar. We figured it was some sort of pulse energy weapon. We did ask what did this, and they gave us some sort of strange response. It didn't translate, but it was an energy weapon when we clarified that. Absolutely was the word we got back. Eventually, we were able to get the ship en route. We were heading towards a giant spaceport. We were told that is where the majority of other humans were being held, as they were held not only for sport and entertainment to beat the crap out of other aliens just to show off their prowess, but also where their breeding facilities were, where many were held just to make more humans for everyone else's entertainment. So, you want us to be your dogs, huh? I still remember one of the men saying that as he looked over at the demon male, who was actually scared at this because he understood the implications. The man next to him calmed him down as he was about ready to draw his knife and slice the alien's horns, head, and anything else he has too off. I turned to the man and simply stated, well, maybe they should have realized that we might be dogs to them, but we travel in packs.